So the APC 1710 prop is the prop we choose for 4-cell to give us the best performance. What's up everybody, I'm Adam and you're watching Model Aviator. There are a lot of airplanes on the market today that are rated for two different voltages. Some are rated for 4S or 3S. In the case of the Super Timber, it's rated for 6S and 4S. So when we do a review on airplanes like that, we fly them on both voltages, and we always recommend that you pilots that only have the lower voltage packs, prop them up. Use a larger prop to make more power on the lower voltage. Well, that always brings about a bunch of questions from our viewers. To what? What prop do we use? How much more power can we make? How do we know how much is too much? Those are all great questions, and in today's tips video, we're going to show you how to figure that out. When you're optimizing a propeller for a specific airplane at a specific voltage, first and foremost, we need to understand what to watch out for. What's our enemy in this process? Heat. Heat is the killer. Heat is what will burn up your motor, it's what will burn up your ESC. Now, amps is a direct correlation to heat, current. But that doesn't tell the whole story. There is no direct correlation to this specific number of amps, meaning this specific temperature. Airplane cooling has a lot to do with it. The placement of the ESC, placement of the motor, what kind of intake and exit holes you have, how much airflow is going around the can of the motor. Do you have any ram air going directly into the holes in front of the motor, flowing over the windings and out the exit holes in the back of the motor? How much airflow is going in and around the ESC, and how efficient is the exit to keep that flowing freely? That really determines a lot. So being aware of amps is important, but you don't want to get fixated on that. The more important figure is actual temperature. When you're in the process of maximizing your prop for any voltage really, information is key. When most of the factors are known, you can push the envelope a bit more. You can make more power and know that while you're at it, you're not going to burn something up. The more limited your information is, the more you're going to have to err to the side of caution. So we're going to show you 3 things that we use regularly when we're figuring stuff like this out. Any one of them can be helpful. There are a couple combinations of 2 of them that can really get the job done, and having all 3 will equip you to be able to handle figuring this out with most airplanes you're going to come across. The first thing is a watt meter. Very simple but oh so useful instrument. You plug it in between your ESC and your battery. Make sure your airplane is secure. You do a full throttle run up, leave it at full throttle for a couple of seconds, bring it back down to idle. Unplug the watt meter from the ESC, leave the battery plugged up, take that up on the bench, and it will have a little window that will have recorded how far the voltage on your battery sagged under load, your maximum watts, and your maximum amps. Now, they can be used for many things other than this. We have a video called Watt Meters 101. We'll put a link in the description to that. Check it out. It's worth watching if you don't know much about watt meters. And the nice thing is, this is not a very expensive instrument. You can get a really good one for less than 20 bucks on Amazon. We'll put a link in the description to one of those as well. The next instrument, very useful tool. This is an infrared temp gun. Actually shoots a little laser. If you take a look at the spinner on our Spitfire there, and we'll kind of wave it around the spinner. When you let go of the trigger, it will record in the bottom right the highest temperature, which is 77.9 that it recorded of everything that I waved it over. And of course, it will give you the current temperature while you're holding the trigger down at whatever you're pointing it at. It's really useful for things like the windings inside the front and the back of the motor. You kind of rub that over all the windings you can get it to, see what the highest temperature is. Useful for the outside of the motor case, outside of the ESC case, and many other things. Very, very useful tool and vital to what we're doing, and thankfully not very expensive. We got that one from Amazon. We'll link it in the description. I think it's like 25 bucks. And finally, telemetry. We fly Spectrum, so we're able to take advantage of the Spectrum Smart Telemetry. There's other telemetry out there. Whatever you can take advantage of will definitely help during a process like this, especially if you're really going to try to push the envelope. With the Spectrum Smart Telemetry, we were able to get MOSFET temperature, which is not something you can shoot with a temp gun. You can get the outside of the ESC case, but not the inner workings of it, so very useful there. And you're able to get the in-flight amps. Depending upon the prop, the kV of the motor, the air density, several factors can determine whether or not an airplane loads up or unloads in the air as far as amps. We had one day where we actually pulled more amps in the air by a good bit than we did on the bench. It's great to know how far it went on a really hot, humid, tough day for these electronics. So telemetry can definitely be a useful tool and kind of be the cherry on top of all the other things you're using to optimize your prop. We're going to get into the numbers and show you some actual testing at the field to get this figured out. But first, Gary Wright is a product developer for Horizon Hobby. He develops and tests every aspect of airplanes like the Super Timber. He specializes in electric power systems, and Gary played a pivotal role for me in my research for this video. He furthered my education quite a bit on electric power systems, the limits, the numbers, ways to test. So Gary, shout out to you. Thanks for the help with this video, man. Appreciate it. So now we'll get into the numbers. We're going to start with propellers. How do we know what propeller to start our testing with to optimize for the lower voltage? Well, there's a formula I use, and it's interesting. Based on my testing, it doesn't really matter if it's an airplane optimized for 4-cell that you're going to try to fly on 3-cell, or an airplane optimized for 6-cell and you're going to fly it on 4-cell. I take the size of the two-bladed prop that is optimized for the higher voltage, or the equivalent two-bladed prop, and I add 2 inches to the diameter of that prop, and that is what I start my testing with at the lower voltage. That's a very safe, conservative place to start, and then you can use these instruments to figure out the numbers you're getting and step it up from there. Sometimes you can step it up a lot, sometimes you can step it up a little. It just really depends on the airplane and the circumstances, the way you fly it. Now, with the Super Timber, it has a 3-bladed prop stock. It's a 13/8 3-blade optimized for 6-cell. So when we do the conversion to 2-blade, that would be a 14/6 2-blade. That's going to make similar watts and similar amps to this 3-blade prop. So I add 2 inches to that. That gives me 16/6. That is the diameter prop that I'm going to start my testing on 4-cell with, and we'll just step it up from there once we see what kind of numbers we're getting. APC props are invaluable for stuff like this. This is what I use for testing. Sometimes I'll just use APC props. I may end up using APCs for testing and then buy a Zor to put on the airplane or something like that. But APC props are available everywhere. Tower has them, Horizon has them. You can get them on Amazon. You can buy them direct from APC. They make just about every diameter and pitch that you can imagine, and they're very inexpensive. So accumulating several of these for testing like this won't cost you an arm and a leg. Speaking of numbers, we need to know what our limits are. What's our limits for amps? What's our limit for temperature? Is there a watt limit? Well, you can go in your manual and see that with the Super Timber, it has an 85 amp ESC, and that's a lot of ESC for this airplane, especially considering that they propped it to not pull anywhere near that many amps. There's a lot of headroom. You could prop it up on 6-cell, not just 4-cell, if you really wanted to. But does that mean you can actually pull 85 amps and be safe? Well, it depends. It depends on the cooling. It depends on what your MOSFET temperatures are in the telemetry as to whether or not you can go that far. It's a number, but temperature means more than the rating, and the temperature can be different depending upon the airplane in spite of the rating. So you definitely want to be able to look at that if you're really going to push it with your ESC. Now, the nice thing about the smart telemetry and an avian ESC is it will shut this ESC down before it allows you to burn it up, which is nice. And when it comes to the motor, same thing. There's a formula that you can You can take your motor out, including your X-mount, which actually functions as a heat sink, not just an X-mount, so that's considered part of the motor. Take your motor out, weigh it. The weight in grams of the motor times 3 will give you the number of watts that that motor should feasibly be able to take. But does that mean that's the limit of watts that you can make with that motor? Well, no, it depends on the cooling. It depends on what temperatures you get when you shoot that thing as to how far you can go. You may be able, if the airplane has great cooling, to make a lot more watts than that. You may not be able to make that many, depending on how you fly and what the cooling is like. So that's why having these instruments really comes in handy if you're going to push it. So we need to know what is pushing it for us. When it comes to MOSFET temperature, I personally don't want to see any more than 200 degrees on the MOSFET temperature. If that's what it's running all the time or slightly more than that, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm going to want to make a change and get that temperature down. When it comes to the motor, I don't want to see more than 185 degrees. Now, that is my personal limits. There may be people that are willing to go hotter than that, and that may be fine, but that's my personal limit. When I put the gun on the motor, I don't want to see any part of it hotter than 185 degrees. Another limit we need to be aware of is prop size. It is absolutely possible to load a motor down by asking it to spin too large of a prop. And even though a lot of the numbers may look good and the temperatures may look good, you can still be doing damage to the motor if the prop is too large. With that in mind, the prop that we're going to settle on for the Super Timber in this video is as large as I'm willing to go with this particular motor. And I think it's fine, but we're still about 300 watts away from what we're making on 6-cell with the stock prop. We've taken the performance on 4-cell from kind of anemic to pretty doggone impressive, but if you are looking to make the same power that the airplane has on the higher voltage, just go with the higher voltage. That is the safest, easiest way to make monster power if that's what you've got to have. So now we're going to take it to the field for some real world testing and show you how we figured this out and came to our conclusion for the best prop on 4-cell for the Super Timber. Now, worth noting, when we're taking our temp gun and shooting the motor, we're going to shoot the front motor windings, the rear motor windings, the rear motor mount or heat sink, and the side of the motor can in each one of the tests. The flight profile is the same. We're going to do a vertical climb as far as we can right after takeoff on each prop that we test. We're going to come down and then go wide open throttle, just circling quickly for 2 minutes straight. We're going to land. We're going to see what the telemetry tells us, and we're going to shoot the temperatures. After that, stick around. We're going to come back here. We've got some key notes and a bit of a debrief on the testing. And then after that, we're going to show you a full performance flight on the optimized prop for 4-cell with the Super Timber. So let's get to the testing. Okay, so this is going to be our baseline. This is stock prop with a 6-cell 5000. We're only going to show you the entire test flight on this first prop so that we can keep things brief. We'll edit all the others. I'm at full throttle now, and I'll maintain that for 2 minutes straight before we land. Okay, so with our 6L 5000, I'm going to go ahead and remove this spinner really fast. We wanted to get the temperature with the spinner.
Spinners can block airflow, not always, so it's worth checking spinner on and off to see how that affects cooling.
So first, our telemetry. .59 amps, the most amps that we pulled during that run for 2 solid minutes at wide open throttle, and the MOSFETs were at 95 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and unplug so that it's safe, and I'm going to shoot the windings inside the motor on the front, .7.1. I'm going to shoot the windings in the back of the motor, .7.2. I'll shoot the back of the motor mount, .7.6. And we'll shoot the side of the can towards the back, .86.7. So that is our baseline with the spinner on 6S.
I immediately took off after that without the spinner to see how that changed the cooling and what kind of temperatures we got. And keep in mind, because we went back to back, this thing got basically 4 minutes of wide open throttle in very close proximity.
6S 5000 stock prop spinner off, just to see if that makes a difference at all. 54.4 amps. The MOSFETs are at 102.2 degrees. Go ahead and unplug so we know we're safe.
Keep in mind, I have to keep the plane plugged up to read the telemetry. It cancels it out the minute I unplug it.
85.8 windings at the front of the motor. .8 windings at the back. .8 on the motor mount or heatsink, and 89.8 on the back of the can with the spinner off. So cooling on this airplane is very good. Notice that the difference in the temperatures is pretty nominal, spinner on or off. Okay, so this is going to be our baseline on 4 cells. It's a 4-cell 6000, I think, with the stock prop.
Notice with the stock prop on 4-cell, I ran out of steam vertically very quickly and had to hammerhead out of it.
Okay. Throttle cut is on. 30 amps. 93.2 on the MOSFET temperature. We'll unplug to make it safe for me to get in front of this thing.
One thing to note, other than when we went back to back on 6S, all the batteries are fresh for every test and the plane has had time to cool.
Front windings 82.8. Rear windings 91.4. Across our motor mount or heat sink 87.4, and the side of our can 96.3. So that's 4-cell with the stock prop. Okay, this is an APC 1610E prop on 4-cell. Let's see how this does.
As you can see, the vertical is much better, and we're going to show one circle down low so you can get a bit of a reference as the plane passes by the trees for the increase in speed with this prop.
Four-cell APC 1610 E-prop, 51.8 amps. MOSFETs are at 96.8 degrees. Unplugged so we're safe. .9 on the front windings. .4 on the rear windings. Across our heat sink or our motor mount, 89.8. And the side of the can, 95.9. That is 4-cell 1610 E-prop from APC. Okay, so now 4-cell APC 1710 E-prop. Let's see what it does.
It doesn't sound like it's on 6L, but it looks like it is, doesn't it?
Okay, so APC 1710 E-prop, 67.2 amps. So more amps than we pulled on the 6L prop with the stock prop. 111.2 degrees on the MOSFETs. Go ahead and unplug. .7 degrees on the front windings. .102 degrees on the rear windings. Back of our motor mount, 97.2. And 107.2 on the back of the motor case. That is with an APC 1710 E-prop on 4-cell.
This is a picture of the telemetry from a very difficult day for electronics. 75 amps, 143 degrees on the MOSFETs. This was a 95-degree high humidity day in Georgia.
Windings 100.9.
And you'll notice as we go through the motor temps that they, like the temp on the MOSFETs and the ESC, are well below our limits.
Outside case 90.9.
That's a bit lower because I shot more towards the front of the case rather than the rear.
The motor mount 100. Back windings 106. So yeah, I mean, I've temped this thing pretty much all over the motor and all the heat sink. Good to go. So there you go. For us, on for sale with the Super Timber, the prop is the 1710 APC E-prop. So we have some notes that are pretty important. The first thing is MOSFET temperature. When you're looking at your telemetry and checking out that MOSFET temperature on the full throttle runs, that doesn't really tell you the whole story, unfortunately. And you have to understand how MOSFETs work. This is going to be a very simplified explanation, but you'll get the gist. Think of a MOSFET as a dam. When you open up a dam and allow the water to flow through, the dam's not working very hard. It's when you close everything off and make that dam do its job, make it hold all that water back, that's when it's under the most pressure. MOSFETs work very similar. They restrict energy. So at full throttle, all the energy is flowing through the MOSFETs. They're wide open, they're not working hard at all, and they're not generating as much heat as they do when you lower that throttle gimbal and ask those MOSFETs to constrict that energy to lower the RPM of the motor. So at a lower throttle setting, they're actually working harder and generating more heat. So if you want to know with a specific prop and a specific voltage what your actual high MOSFET temperature is, you need to take the airplane off, fly it at the lowest possible throttle setting you can to safely maintain flight. Do that for 3 or 4 minutes, land it, and check that temperature. It's going to be higher than when you're flying this thing around at full throttle doing the test you saw us doing. So when you do those full throttle tests, try to prop your airplane up. If you are within 25 to 30 degrees of whatever your limit is for your MOSFET temperature, you need to do that test to make sure that that prop doesn't take it over that limit. If it does, you may have to back it off maybe an inch in pitch or something to get that temperature down, so you just need to know that. When it comes to using the gun, the temperature gun, with the Super Timber, we could get to every part of the motor that we wanted to shoot. Not every airplane is going to be that way. And you're not always going to be able to shoot. You may only be able to go through the battery bay and literally shoot the motor mount or maybe the back windings or something like that. You might be able to shoot the side of the can, and that's all you can get to in that particular airplane. That is why taking this to the field with you, playing with it and making notes is really important. That's what I'm doing. I'm pretty much shooting every airplane that I fly, and what I'm doing is getting an education on the difference in temperatures, the different parts. That way, when I come across an airplane where I can't shoot every part, and I can maybe only shoot one part of it to get the temperature, maybe on the motor mount or the side of the can, I know how that correlates to the temperature of the windings, which is really the most important temperature. So if I know the difference on average in the temperature of the windings versus whatever I can get to, then I can still know whether or not I'm in a safe range, even if I can't shoot every part of the motor. The other thing we wanted to talk about is eCalc. Calculators like that are things that a lot of people use to prop airplanes, and that's fine if you fill out all of the fields properly. But that's very difficult to do, and it can't account for real world things that you'll run into. It can't account for the way you manage throttle. It can't really accurately account for the air density and temperature on that day. It certainly can't account for how effective the cooling of the airplane is or isn't. There is no substitute for having instruments like this being at the field and doing actual testing and getting actual numbers. So just remember that. Another thing, when it comes to a watt meter, if you don't have these instruments, obviously having them is the best case scenario, but if all you have is a watt meter, there is a quick, dirty way to figure out how to prop an airplane like the Super Timber for the lower voltage. If you don't have a 6-cell pack, borrow one. Even if you don't have the right 6-cell pack, but you have a 6-cell pack you can plug into the airplane, do a watt meter pull with that battery fully charged and see how many amps the airplane is pulling on the stock prop on the higher of the two voltages. Then, if you can match that amperage with a prop on the lower voltage, that's going to give you a lot more power than you'd have with the stock prop on the lower voltage. It won't be as much power as you can make if you have the tools to really push it, but it's certainly going to be more than you'd have gotten with a stock prop. So that's just a quick and dirty way of doing it with a watt meter. I think that is it for the notes. So there's nothing left to do now but show you what the Super Timber will do on 4-cell with that optimized prop. Here I am rock and rolling with the Super Timber on a 1710 APC. Enjoy that. Happy flying. Hope this was educational and you got something out of it. Hopefully now you can do this for yourself. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week with Something Cool with Wings.
I'm very impressed with the fact that you can hover this plane and walk it out of a hover vertically with a 1710 on 4-cell. Some of the tape I used on the back of this prop to balance it actually came off, so it's just a hair out of balance. That's the reason it's so loud and you're hearing the sound you hear. Well, that and the fact that our mic intensifies every sound by quite a bit. We're very happy with the plane on 4-cell with the APC 1710E prop. We think you will be too. Hopefully this video has taught you everything you need to know about doing this for yourself and figuring stuff like that out. Take care of yourselves. Happy flying. We'll see you next week.